I am Scott Herndon, and I'm your Republican candidate for the Idaho State Senate in District 1. And I want to talk about something that's going to be on your ballot on the general election ballot on November 8th, 2022, if you're an Idaho voter. It's going to be all over the state on your ballot. I've done a previous video on SJR 102, the constitutional amendment to allow the legislature to call itself into special session during times of urgent need. I highly recommend a yes vote on that. Right after that item on your ballot is going to be what's called the Idaho Advisory question. The Idaho Advisory question. And I want to describe what that is, tell you what it's about, okay? I'm going to give you the language first. So here is exactly the language that's going to be on your ballot. It's kind of long. So basically, the Idaho legislature passed a bill on September 1st. And that was in a special session of the Idaho legislature, and the bill was 14 pages, and on page 14, they wanted this question put on your ballot. And it says this: do you approve or disapprove of the state of Idaho using the record budget surplus to refund $500 million back to hardworking Idaho taxpayers? Okay, here's one question. Of course you approve of that. Who doesn't approve of taking excess taxpayer money above and beyond what's been budgeted to be spent by the state and refunding it to us, the taxpayer? That's a good idea. So they're going to do that, $500 million. And then they're asking, do you approve of cutting ongoing income taxes by more than $150 million? Income tax cut. That's great. Of course, that's good. Especially because we have a record budget surplus in Idaho, so we're obviously taking in more money at the state level than we need to spend. So cut taxes. That's good. And then it says, do you, I'm sorry, it makes me laugh a little bit. Would you want to put more money in classrooms by increasing education and student funding by a record $410 million? So that's the third part of the question. And this says, your approval of this effort would combat historic inflation by returning money to taxpayers, creating a simple flat tax, and making the single largest investment in public education in Idaho history. Okay, here's the trick. They're asking you to vote on this in 6 weeks on November 8th, but this bill has already become law. The $500 million rebate has already been passed by the legislature and signed by the governor. It really doesn't matter what you think at this point. It's already done. Okay, then the $150 million tax cut starts in 2024. It's a done deal. It's already been done. It doesn't matter what you think. I mean, sure, it matters what you think, but it doesn't affect anything. What they're doing is they just did a special session, passed this bill, and they're asking for your blessing. They're asking for your blessing. I don't know why they pass 200 bills a year or more, and they never ask for your blessing on those bills. Why are they doing it on this bill? I don't know. Maybe they're smarter politically in some way than I can imagine. But anyway, here's what happened. H1 just recently passed overwhelmingly in the legislature on September 1st, and the governor signed it in a special session of the Idaho legislature. We had a $2 billion budget surplus in Idaho. That means we were collecting more corporate and personal income taxes and more sales taxes that exceeded by $2 billion the actual budgeted expenditures of the state. That's called a budget surplus. So we had too much money, and it's taxpayer money. So they wanted to give some of that back. $500 million one-time tax rebate. That means it's not ongoing. It only happens once, right? So we're going to see checks in our mailbox soon, or a direct deposit to your account of $300 or $600 or some other amount, minimum of $300 and $600, single versus a married couple. And that's good. And then in 2024, we lowered income tax rates in Idaho from above 6% to a flat tax, 5.8%. That's good. Tax cuts are good. They stimulate the economy. They stimulate investment. They help people. They help us. And we were able to do it. What we could have done and what we did not do is give property tax relief. See, property taxes are collected locally to fund your local cities, counties, sewer districts, water districts, all your local taxing agencies, and they're collected locally. The state's not in charge of that, but the state could take sales tax and corporate and personal income tax and use that to offer property tax relief by funding some local services. And to me, property tax relief, we've seen 2 income tax cuts in the last couple of years. And now it seemed like it was time to see either a sales tax cut or a property tax cut, because property taxes in particular are having to be paid by people on fixed incomes who may have a very expensive piece of real estate, but they don't have the cash flow to continue to see big increases in the local taxing district's budgets that are being passed on to that taxpayer on a fixed income. And with inflation, of course, the budgets are going to be very strained locally. And so I want to give relief to property taxpayers, and with a $2 billion surplus, we actually collect a total of $2.1 billion amongst all the local taxing districts in Idaho. We practically could have funded at least once all of the property taxes. So certainly we could have funded on an ongoing basis property tax reductions or relief in some way. And so that's what I would have liked to see after, again, we've already done income tax reductions in the last 2 years. Now, here's the problem with the education piece. Reclaim Idaho was running a ballot initiative, Proposition 1. Because this bill passed, they pulled their ballot initiative. They were going to raise income taxes substantially to match those of California and New York, 11%. So they pulled that. They were going to raise income taxes to better fund education. And the Idaho legislature is responsible for funding public education. It's in the Idaho Constitution. They have to do it. And so they should do it, but it isn't always a question of money. It's a question of how the money is spent. It's called funding formula. Is it getting to the right places, the places that really need the money and that are educating students in the right things? And so these are questions that the legislature answers every year. And what this bill does and what they're asking you to approve, and this is really critical, is we have a general account where sales taxes and income taxes go into this bucket of money. And they created a new bucket of money, 2 of them, but I'll just call it 1 for now, for education, in addition to everything that they've already been spending on education. We already spend 55% of Idaho's budget at the state level on education. We're one of the highest percentage states of our total budget that we spend on education. We're in the top, not the bottom, on total budget. And that's only 70 to 75% of everything that your local schools are getting, because they're also running levies and bonds that you vote on locally. And so that makes up a whole additional pot of money. So on a per student, between the state funding and the local levies, the per student actually is much better than the national rankings would suggest. And interestingly enough, we see some schools with higher per student spending, yet worse test results than other schools with lower per student spending. And so it isn't just how much you spend per student, it's how you spend the money. Okay, but here's what we did. We had this bucket of money of general taxes, general fund for sales and income taxes, and we created a new bucket for education. And we're going to take $410 million from this bucket and we're going to put it in this bucket so that now it's no longer eligible to be used for anything that this bucket used to be used for. So it goes in this bucket, not just once, $410 million this year, but every single year, forever, has no sunset clause. It never goes away. So over the next 10 years, we're going to take $4.1 billion out of this bucket and put it into this bucket. And then the bill didn't even decide how that bucket gets spent. That's going to be decided by the legislature every year going into the future. So what they committed us to is at a time when we don't know what the future tax revenues in Idaho are going to be, they have committed us to a special bucket of money and funding a special bucket of money. That may or may not be a bad idea, but it's not the most cautious move when the nation, the United States, is in massive federal debt. And we're in massive inflation and the economy is on the precipice of disaster. May not be the time to make that kind of a decision. And so that's why you may want to say no to this. And again, all your no vote is doing is expressing your caution and disapproval at this time of committing. And it won't even change anything because the deed is done. It's already been done. The $410 million is now obligated. It's already going to go from this bucket to this bucket this year and next year and the next year and the next year. And this is in addition to all the other investments we've been making in education. We've seen massive increases in our investments in education over the last 2 years in Idaho. Historic increases. And so the question is, you're going to be asked to vote on something that they've already done. They phrased it in a way where you practically can't say no, but you may want to say no. And I can tell you that the Bonner County Republican Party, the Central Committee, is saying no because we feel like we were browbeat into this. And a lot of legislators did too. Most of the legislature voted yes, but almost everybody who voted yes for the bill said that they didn't really want to vote yes because they didn't want to have to do both things at the same time. Tax cuts and commit this bucket of money, $410 million a year, into this bucket. They felt like that's a totally different issue. And they were really hamstrung politically into doing this by the governor's office. So question is, do you as a voter want to approve what the governor just made them do? Or do you just want to say, hey, I don't approve of that? We could have waited. This is another reason to say no. You said, hey, look, we got a record budget surplus. We could have waited and decided on this in January. Let the legislature decide in January. Anyway, so that's your Idaho Advisory question that's going to be on your ballot. They're asking you to approve or disapprove something they've already done. They're taking a poll. They're using your taxpayer money to add another ballot item to take a poll. Okay? And that's all I have on it. You guys have a blessed evening. Thanks for listening. I'm Scott Herndon.